Hi folks, hope you're all well and safe. Well, we're missing this fine weather in Wales. We're still sort of like been allowed out to go and play today onwards for a few miles outside the house. So looking forward this week to sort of trying to get out and maximising some of this weather. Hey, this one's been really good. I'm just going to quickly do a quick background on me. So there's lots of familiar faces there. It's nice to see you again. And then a quick summary of how this will work, and then just sort of like dive in. I've got like a double number of questions here. It's actually taking me sort of 6 sides of A4 and sort of 3 to 4 hours this afternoon going through them all. So there's been some really good, challenging questions, and it's actually been quite enjoyable going through them. It's got my brain like really working hard. So just briefly, for those of you who don't know me, based in North Wales, worked in the industry for sort of best part of 25 years now, for a variety of organisations, charity, private, a local authority, and I've been working for myself for quite a few years now. I'm just run my own mountaineering business based up here, predominantly in North Wales, but also Scotland and also overseas. And as Joe says, been a course director, provider and a director for mountain training in Wales for sort of best part of 10, 11 years now. So hopefully kind of got a bit of an idea of some of like this group management stuff that you've been talking about. I've got my ML like in the 90s, so quite a long time ago. And I've been working as a provider or a staff member on mountain training courses for quite a few years as well. So the group management sort of theme came about from, I actually just threw some questions out to some MTA members, sort of what would you like to do? And this was one of the most popular ones, and there's some real meaty stuff going on tonight. So what some of the situations that I'm going to discuss tonight sort of could be dealt with differently. So this is my thoughts, these are my guidance, this is based on my experience. So, you know, please don't necessarily take that this is the way. There are numerous ways of dealing with some of these situations, and this is just sort of penned out my thoughts as guidance, essentially. I've made an assumption that all these situations sort of over 18s, you know, under 18s, we're kind of into a different environment and we have a higher duty of care. So you know, these will be quite challenging, some of these, if it's an under 18 situation. I'll go through the questions. I'll do a quick summary of key points. I think as I was going through it this afternoon, I realised that I think I really do need to summarise like how I've sort of set the day out a little bit. And then if you've got questions, then, you know, feel free towards the end to sort of like drop them up into chat or wave. Alternatively, as I'm chatting through the session, if something sparks an interest or a question, then just drop it into chat box and then I'll cover it right at the end. And it'll be an hour. I've got a clock on, so I'll kind of like whiz through these double set of questions really as quick as I can. Brilliant. So in no particular order, feels like a game show host here. But anyway, in no particular order, Peter, I'll just quickly read out the question or summarise, paraphrase the question as well, so you kind of got a bit of a background to it. How to deal with a group where it transpires one member has considerably more limited abilities, e.g. fitness far below necessary level than the rest of the group, and more limited than the expected activity requires. Pretty common, this one, I think. So, you know, there's a theme here throughout the evening, so preparation is crucial for me. So one of the things I'd be thinking about here would be like, you know, what sort of information is supplied to your clients. Now, I appreciate there's two aspects here. One is if you're working for yourself or if you're working for somebody else, but essentially like what type of information is being supplied to the clients. And does it sort of mention this type of scenario? I mean, not to say specific as this, but certainly around fitness-wise and health issues and objectives. Now, if you're working for somebody, and perhaps even if yourself, then, you know, this might have even been considered. So it might actually be part of like the operating procedures of the company or you've put yourself together. And so you may have already questioned what were you going to do. So you might have your options on the table at this stage. However, if on the day, you kind of do your meet and greet, run through the day. So in the morning, you know, we generally will meet people, talk through the day, and we're going to hit this theme a bit more through the evening. Do you actually cover the subject? So you actually got these people in front of you or this person in front of you, and do you actually cover this type of scenario? And it's not necessarily like pinning it down to like fitness and sort of putting people under pressure here already, but sort of sensitively finding ways to sort of talk about like, we may not achieve our objective today. And so therefore, these are the decisions that I will make. And it's better to deal with that in that environment. So, you know, for me, that environment will be indoors where it's not windy, it's not raining, and generally we've got a cup of tea in our hands as well. So we can kind of have a reasoned, informed discussion around a table about how the day will play out. In my experience, adults are a nightmare sometimes to work with. I mean, kids are pretty easy, but like sometimes adults are a real nightmare. And I think it's because like we're all deemed competent and capable of making our own choices. And so this is why we have these type of situations occur sometimes. So, you know, it might be that someone who hasn't really done much, a great deal, but they're like, yeah, well, I can go up a mountain, no worries at all. And so, you know, they don't necessarily like think about their actions or like what they need to do prior to it. So in your morning meeting, let's call it that, you can ask them, not necessarily specifically, but you can ask about fitness around the table. You know, what do you do? What do you do on a weekly basis? Now, obviously, people talk about gyms, and that's fine, but carrying a rucksack up uneven terrain up a mountain is a little bit different to a gym. So there is, you know, some knowledge there, some fitness, but, you know, I would kind of keep an open mind on exactly what that would mean. I think the key one that I'd be really interested in when I talk to people in the morning is talk to them about currency. You know, if you go on the mountains or go into the hill, when were you last on the mountains on the hill? This has happened to me numerous times in my early part of my career where I foolishly chose not to ask this type of question, and people like allowed me to believe in their capability and sort of almost like scared me a little bit. They were like, oh, I've done this and I've done this and I've done that, and I'm like, oh my word, you know, I'm a small measure of what you've achieved. And so the bit that I hadn't asked was, when did you do it all? And so when you go on the hill, within 2 minutes you realize they're not quite where they think they are because they haven't been walking in the mountains for the last 20 years. So the currency word for me is quite a big one. You know, you want to know when they were last out, and that gives you a real good figure of their ability. In terms of like, if you're actually on the hill, if it's got to that stage and, you know, things aren't too good, then I suppose there's a few options available to you. And this is the bit where it's, you know, it's quite open to, you know, you need some context here. You need to kind of be there actually to make those real decisions. Splitting the group, you know, opens up a whole quagmire of like, of a further discussion really. But, you know, do you send somebody back and do you allow the rest of the team to carry on? If you send somebody back, you know, is it on their own, with someone else? What sort of kit they carry? Where are you? What's the terrain they're going to journey across, the distance? How are you going to know when they're actually off the hill, and so on? So again, you know, if you're working from a company point of view, the expectation would be there'd be something perhaps in the sort of the operating procedures to sort of acknowledge this. So you'd have some guidance already. Option 2, that you all go back. So maybe you're not that far from the car park, and so, you know, you deem it to be sensible to sort of like all go back and take that person back, if that's what your option, as your only option is. Or the other option, and I kind of always like a challenge, so another option would be to change plan. So, you know, and again, you think in your preparation, so information you sent them and also information you've talked about that morning meeting, then hopefully, you know, you would have talked about, we will go on the mountain, things may develop, we may have to go to an option B or a plan B or a plan C. And so it wouldn't be alien to them if you acknowledge that on the day. So those would be kind of like your options. There may be others, but those are sort of 3 options that sort of jumped out at me. Hope that's one, answered that one for you, Peter. Another one for Peter, managing expectations where conditions mean a change in plan is necessary that diverts away from the hoped for summit or key activity, particularly where that no longer possible high point or activity has been a long-held client ambition, reason the client signed up. Yeah, it's a good one, this. I guess probably something I mentioned the other week is about never promising the summit. So if you promise a summit in the morning meeting, so today we are going to go to the top, I can guarantee it, you've just snookered yourself badly, you know. So I'd always avoid that. And, you know, you can avoid that in all these processes prior, even in terms and conditions. So my terms and conditions, I don't necessarily specifically say, I don't promise you the summit, but I talk about like extenuating circumstances like weather that may not allow us to achieve our objectives of the day. there's a really interesting story. A friend of mine is a guy, and he was working in the Alps quite a few years ago, and he had a really tricky scenario, a bit like this, I suppose, where they had a really awful weather storm come through, and they were going to do a technical summit the next morning. And the client, a fairly affluent client, had basically turned around to him and said, "I've paid you to get us to the summit." And my friend was like, "Well, no, actually you've paid me to get you safely off this mountain." And I think that's a good mindset to have. That is the mindset we should have. We don't have the mindset to kind of achieve summits. Those are a bonus. Our primary job is to keep people safe and to get them off the mountain. So for me, it's kind of like, that's the mindset that I have. When we get to the top, if we do, that's the bonus, but that's only half the journey. And now the hard work will really begin for me on the descent. So kind of managing those expectations early on in the day, really important. Cool. Move on to John. John, working as a freelance ML, where do you stand if a member of your group decides to walk away from the group without notice and do his or her own thing with no intention of return to the group? What would be appropriate actions to take, particularly with regards to that person's safety who initially was under your responsibility? Yeah, this is tricky. Similar to above, I suppose, the previous question. But this one's like, rather than somebody's ability, you actually got somebody who's making a conscious decision to leave the party. So, that's quite challenging, because it's challenging your responsibility, it's challenging your leadership and so on. I think one of the things I try and do when I take people out, and it starts, I meet people regularly in a cafe, for example. It's a great start of the day, having a coffee and a chat. But part of the thing I'm trying to do is not only set the day up, but I'm also trying to build a rapport with people. And so, I'll be talking about all sorts of things, like EastEnders last night and the weather and, people's families and whatever else. And so, yeah, I am interested in people, but what I'm trying to do is build a sense of trust and relationship with them as well. And so when we go on the mountains, then people will hopefully respond to me in a positive manner. And I'm trying to get people to respect the decisions that I make. So, we have to make hard decisions at times, and they're not easy. People are paying us money to take us onto the mountains and bring them off. And certainly if someone's is very specific on a route or a summit, and maybe it's over a couple of days, you're doing a bit of warm up as well, and it's not going to happen, then it's a really tricky situation to be in. So I think for me, I'm always trying to build rapport with people. So when I have to make decisions, then it's easier for them. And hopefully we then try and avoid this type of situation occurring. But if you could put all the preventative stuff in place, it could still happen, I guess. Dead tricky. I think all you can do is really appeal to their better nature and have a good chat with them. Identify what your responsibility is, identify what they've signed up to, because in some format or another, they've agreed to go out on the mountains with you. Identify to them by leaving the group the risk that they now expose themselves to. And for me, I would ask them the question whether they'd be comfortable with that. And that's taking in all the factors that are around you, the physical environment and the things like weather, for example. And if they are, then just agree a basic action plan, which route they're going to go back, which is potentially going to be the way you've traveled, because, they've got knowledge of it, and things like comms. So once they're back, how will that they're off the hill? And I kind of want to do this with a witness as well, personally. So for me, I would just do that. If it was appropriate, I'd probably just do it quite publicly with the group. So I have the group as witnesses. And I've made an assumption here that this is happening in good weather. Sort of like, as I look out the window, the weather that I've got available to me today, not in bad weather, strong winds, rain. I mean, you've got a nightmare scenario then. That's a really tricky one. And I don't know how to answer that exactly until you're there with that person. It would just be one of those things on the day, and you just have to grip that person and have a reasoned conversation with them to try and find a middle ground. So hopefully that's giving you some answers there, John. Good question there. Yeah, really good question. And I think I had something similar recently in the last few weeks, and I said then, if it hasn't happened to you, this type of scenario could easily happen for you in the future. Cool. Debbie, So last time I mentioned about promising the summit, so never promise the summit, which I've just alluded to again. So she asked, how and when do you convey that message to the groups that you lead? Kind of throughout, basically. So, you know, whether it's a casual phone call or casual email, through to a booking form, through to the course notes, throughout that process, I acknowledge the fact that just because you've booked me to go and do something in the mountains, there is no guarantee that we will achieve that. And so it's pretty clear. And then on the day of, again, reiterate it. So hopefully I capture it somewhere through that process. And if someone's like a bit curious about it, then they'll ask further questions or delve a little deeper. And you know, if the weather's pretty bad, and we've had a few of those sort of stormy things over the last few years, then, you know, I'll be chatting to the client a few days before as well, just on a personal note, just sort of give them a ring or give them an email and go, looks pretty rough. You know, what's your thoughts? And, you know, we got these are the options and so on. So just sort of be proactive about it, I suppose. And second question from Debbie was, do you have any similar group management tips that you've developed through experience? This is actually a chunky question, Debbie. I actually started this thinking this would be a piece of cake to answer, and 2 pages later I was still writing, so thanks for this fun. So just bear with me and I'll quickly whiz you through some top tips or some sort of things that I would do on a daily basis. So basically, do you have any other similar group management tips you've developed through experience? So planning stage, I kind of think about the outcome, the weather, and then on location. So, you know, I know this is like planning, but this is still a big part of my management with people. So outcome, what's their outcome? What's the weather like? Then I think about a location. I don't do it any other way. There's lots of people who wake up in the morning and go, right, I'm going to go up this mountain today. Then they meet people and go, what would you like to do? And then they think about the weather. It's the wrong way around, you know, because like the outcome and the weather will dictate the location to me, okay? And on the day, I go through my pre-checks, and I'm going to come back to that. Someone's actually asked me what sort of things will I chat to groups on my pre-checks. But why can't you do an aid memoir? Like, why can't you have a list in front of you? So like whenever I run a mountain training course, like a mountain leader or a rock climbing instructor course, I actually have a list in front of me. So in the morning briefing or the morning welcome and so on, I actually go through the routine of exactly what I need to say, so don't miss a single thing. And I think it's a really good way of like setting yourself up, rather than like trying to remember everything that you should be saying, going through a tick list. You know, it could be on a phone or an iPad or whatever. I think is a really good professional way of doing it, because it means you don't miss some of the basic stuff. And in our job, you know, we can't miss the basics, because like if we miss out like never promising the summit, and then we end up on the hill turning the groups around, they'll be like, well, you never told us we might not get to the summit. So it ensures that like I don't miss out the key things. Yeah, I mentioned currency. So I definitely want to know the currency of people. So, you know, when were you last out in the mountains? And then what I'm going to do, as soon as I leave that car park, I will observe people. So you've told me you can do this and you have done this. So I actually now want to like see the evidence against the information you provided me. Hopefully it all matches. Occasionally it doesn't. So like you might have to think about plan B. But I really want to watch people closely for the first part of the day. Knowledge of the routes is really important. So, you know, I do go onto routes that I don't know particularly well, haven't even been up before, but on the whole, as a general working platform, I would choose a route that I know well. It means I haven't got any nav. I can focus on people. I know where the physical hazards are, and I know the cutoff points, the times of the day, and what my options are to go to plan C and D, etc. And that could be based against the outcome, but it might also be based against other factors. So I mentioned the outcome and I mentioned the weather. Both will influence where I go on that day. But also, like, you know, certainly at the moment with this weather we have here in Wales, this is draining to work in. So like if we had been on the hill for the last sort of like 10 days, 2 weeks or whatever in these type of temperatures, you know, I will physically get more and more tired. So I might actually choose routes based on the outcome and on the weather, but that I will work for me, because I will be more tired and therefore won't necessarily be as an effective manager or leader of people on the hill. So I'm going to choose a route that's really dead easy for me. So like, it means I don't have to think too much about it. I've been here before and I know quite a bit about the area. So it makes it a little bit easier for me. So throughout the day, keep informing, keep observing, and keep yourself maintained. So I'm always chatting to people. Yeah, I'm not just always chatting about TV last night. I do actually inform people about things in the mountains. So I'm always telling them what's going on. This is where we are. This is what the weather's doing. This has influenced my decisions. Let's have some food. Let's put a warm jacket on, and so on. So I'm always informing. I'm always observing. You know, it's like a dynamic risk assessment of the individuals you're looking after. So you're looking for, you know, in the cafe, in the meeting point, if you've never met these people before, you're trying to work out what they're like in a stable environment. You know, a cafe is as, you know, as comfortable hopefully as it can be. You know, it's warm, you've got a hot mug of tea in your arms, you're a nice social peer group, and you're looking forward to the day out. So hopefully you can kind of get a measure of people and kind of what their normal appearance and character is like. So by watching them through the day throughout the hill day, then you're looking for those peaks and troughs. And the peaks are hopefully are like, you know, the joy and euphoria being the hills, hopefully the summit success, but also the troughs are like the points that you need to look for. You know, why is that person hitting a low point? There has to be a reason for it. If you're not observing, then these are the things you won't pick up. Keep yourself maintained. So, you know, the group is only as strong as you are, really. So if you don't look after yourself on the hill, then it's not going to be good. And that could be throughout. So like certainly at the moment with this weather, like I mentioned, but things like, you know, thinking about the previous night, what you've eaten, how well you've slept and so on. But then during the day, you know, thinking about fueling yourself. So making sure you're eating and drinking enough. And also, you know, if it's a bit nippy, putting some more layers on stuff. So you've got to look after yourself on the hill. I'm sure we've all been there. We're an hour from the car park and we're all tripping over our own 2 feet. But when you're working, it doesn't really look very good. But secondly, it won't allow you to make effective decisions either and manage situations. So, you know, if you find yourself getting a bit knackered on the way down, then just like delay. You know, it's easy to delay teams and like redirect their focus somewhere else. But get a Mars bar down your throat or something, whatever it is your snack, and, you know, refuel and take that on board, even if you're that close to the car park. You know, we all know statistically a lot of mountain rescue accidents happen in the later part of the day. And, you know, that's quite often the reason why we are low on fuel and we start tripping over things. And that can't be you. So you need to perform, you know, to a higher standard right to the car park. Make decisions. Yes, I know it's easy to say, but you know, making decisions is a big part of our day, really. And I think, you know, never reflect back and regret anything you make a decision on. You know, I've done loads of stuff over the years where I've reflected back and thought that wasn't ideal, but I don't regret the decisions I've made. You know, and I stand by them. But, you know, you base your decision on your knowledge. You know, it's things like the route, the weather, times of the day, and the awareness of individual needs, and so on. So, you know, you're taking all these factors, all this information on board, and you're making decisions based on that. Informed folk, I mentioned it already. So, you know, people aren't unexpected about key decisions that you make. So, you know, I'll often talk about weather, for example, with folk, you know, early on. And so in the morning brief, you know, we'll sit around a cup of tea, we'll look at the weather forecast, we'll look at what they would like to do for the day. And then if the weather's like sort of that grey type of line, you know, it's a bit challenging, but you feel that you've got the right sort of team with you. You know, they're talking about being current and they've done some good, exciting things. And I like a challenge, you know, I'm always up for a bit of a challenge and expanding people's comfort zones. But, you know, I would kind of be talking straight away about how challenging it might be and what that wind might do to you. And on the route, laying a map out, talking about the route and talking about why we might be taking that route. It's more sheltered, gives us more opportunity. Although these areas here, it might become more gusty because it gets channeled and so on. So I'm using my local knowledge to sort of like over a cup of tea to sort of like give them a visual idea of what that day is going to look like. And as we drive in, I'm looking for the evidence. You know, that's the forecast. Where's the evidence? You know, are the trees doing what, you know, they should be doing in these sort of winds? You know, what was that cyclist like as I drove past him? Get into the car park. Can I get the door open? And as soon as I do that, I'm talking to the clients, you know, I'm changing, guys, did you see that cyclist? Jeez, pretty windy here, isn't it? So I'm front loading it all the time. So as we go up through the mountain, like, oh, do you remember this bit? This is the bit I was talking to you about. This is where it channels the wind. It gets pretty strong. It's wilder, isn't it? So, you know, all the time I'm sort of keeping people informed of what's going on, but I'm really just sort of like voicing my concerns, I suppose. And then like the time I have to sort of turn the group around, they'll be like, yeah, glad you did that. Wonder when you're going to do that. And so I like to front load things a lot with people. And sometimes like there's an intuitive thing going on. People talk about it as sixth sense or something along those lines. I'm not really sure that sort of totally exists. It's generally like it's your experience in the mountains that exists. And so what happens is when you get the hairs in the back of your neck sort of go up, I suppose, or you have this sixth sense, or intuitively your stomach doesn't feel great. It doesn't mean that like you've gone all Jedi-like. What it means is that your brain is actually taking on board all these factors based on all of your mountain walking experience, and it's identifying that there is something that is developing the wrong way, but your brain just can't compute it. And so what you need to do is take stock. You need to sort of really stop and think about what's going on and try and analyze the information that's presented to you and work out what's going on. Now, obviously, you know, you don't necessarily have a lot of time to do this, which is why I think it's hard sometimes to really pinpoint down what's going on. And there have been numerous occasions over the years where I've been on a mountain with folk and I couldn't honestly tell them when we got back why I've turned you around. But something at the time was like really nagging me. And clearly there's a lot of things that were going on, indicators that my brain was picking up, but I couldn't analyze quick enough, but I turned them around. And, you know, I've been dead honest with them at the end and said, I wasn't too sure why, however, but because I put up some rapport with people and that, and they trust the decision I've made, you know, it all ends up really well. But hand on heart, I couldn't tell you exactly why I turned it around. It wasn't like a lack of fitness, and it wasn't like because someone kept falling over, and it wasn't because the wind had blown us over a few times, but there was something there. So, you know, do listen to your intuition, your sixth sense, or your Jedi skills, whatever you want to call it. Do listen to it, because that will help you make better decisions. I've almost finished the question, Debbie. So you see what I mean? It went on this one. When you get back though, reflect on what you've done. I think this is a really important part of my day. You know, we're not perfect. You know, we do, you know, we can always learn from what we do. And I really like this little phrase, which is forget the mistake, remember the lesson. So I don't really dwindle too much on like what's happened, but I try and take forward what I perhaps could do next time. And I'm independent, I suppose, so I don't really work for companies and stuff. But what I do, I've got quite a few friends in the industry and who are around here like myself. And so I use them as an opportunity to like, we chat to each other about things, you know, like, you know, last week was I had a bit of a rough day. This is what happened. And it's really good to use them as a sounding board. So it's part of my reflection process. And the last tip I can give you, Debbie, would be managing people. You know, if you're going to work in the mountains on a regular basis, things will happen. You know, you are going to get a twisted ankle and you might have to 999 it and ask for help. That's just the reality of the environment we're in. You know, these things do happen. And so if you find yourself in that situation, you know, you manage as you need to, you stabilize the situation, but do find yourself some breathing space at some point. You know, and breathing space might be 30 seconds or it might be a few minutes out, but try and take yourself out of that situation to give yourself that time to reflect on what's happened, what you've done about it so far, and then come up with an informed process of what's going to happen next. And it's really valuable to get yourself that breathing space. If you don't, you just get head down and you might have to miss other things as well. Hope that's giving you a few of the top tips, Debbie. Sorry, I went on a bit. But yeah, really good, that one. Lizzie. Okay, Lizzie. So Lizzie came up with a really good question, or a series of questions. You come across a snake or a spider on the walk. How would you deal with someone who is petrified of them and refuses to continue walking? I don't know if you can see my t-shirt, but that's probably what I'd go with. Do not panic. Anyway, that's for you, Lizzie. Thanks very much. So yeah, I think you could take this along anything's really. I've had this with cows and sheep, bizarrely. You know, younger people in the city, not not been out in the fields before. Even snow, took a guy out from Jamaica once before, never seen snow, and honestly, like, didn't know what to do. So so I don't think it's just around spiders and snakes. I think you can find something that's quite normal in the UK, and it could be quite challenging for someone. So I think, like, you know, if we took this specific one though, you know, manage the expectation prior. So, you know, maybe it's part of your morning meeting, or, you know, your setup, your front loading about, you know, there may be snakes and spiders on the journey, for example. And if that's the case, that someone then identifies to you or you're aware of it, then maybe like work with them to sort of work out how it's going to be managed. You know, what can we do to work with each other and help each other, and what do you need me to do to sort of offer you some assistance and stuff. So is there a solution between the two of you chatting and working it through? And I think, you know, in lots of scenarios when people are a little bit nervous about getting to the mountains because of something, then just chatting will, you know, you'll be able to find a middle ground that you're both comfortable with to sort of like then go on and continue. If you find a solution, then deploy the method. That was a good way of doing it. But reroute, I guess, would be an option. I mean, I think here as well, you know, if it was like an overseas thing, then maybe you've got a local guide, and I would quickly have slippery shoulders and devolve responsibility of the snake and spider to them to deal with. I'll look after my client, and the snake and spider will be dealt with by the local. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Not an easy one, but I think, you know, you could go bigger than that. Like I was saying, there's lots of things that inhibit people going into the mountains, and we just need to work with them to find those solutions. Next question from Lizzie. In your group, you have two people that have a massive argument and neither will back down. This creates a real awkward atmosphere for everyone. What do you do? I can't actually think of that happening to me. Maybe it has. I don't remember. The thing as a mountain leader, we've got so many different hats on, haven't we? I mean, the process depends on when you went through the process, but certainly when I went through the process, it was all about hard skills. So, you know, could you navigate some random contour at night, 20 kilometers away using a candle or something? It was all a bit strange. Whereas these days, it's a much more balanced sort of award, and then there are things in the pipeline to make it better as well. But you know, we have so many, I suppose, hats on in respect of, like, we're often like a doctor or a counsellor or a mediator and so on. And those are things that really at the moment sort of like it's based on your character and your personality and your life skills bringing you through those situations. Every day I go onto the hill, I never quite know. I know what I want to happen, but I never quite know what will happen. And there's quite often, well, not quite often, but there's been occasional times when really strange things have popped up, something like this perhaps. And it might be something that, you know, you're not aware of, you're not involved on, then it just sort of blows up on the hill. I think, like, in this particular situation with two people with a big argument, I think we just need to find a middle ground that's acceptable to both sort of immediately, to manage the rest of the day, however that's going to look now. But I need to keep the group safe, and I need to find a middle ground that's going to work for both of them. So I guess there's going to be some sort of discussion with each individual to sort of diffuse, not solve, but just to diffuse the situation until you're off the hill. Now, if you're on an expedition, because I know where you're coming from, Lizzie, here, and you know, you may have this on an expedition being not something just an overnight perhaps, but maybe for a week or 2 weeks. Yeah, this is a tricky one. But again, you know, if it's yourself or you're working for a company, that undoubtedly this would be like in the operating procedures, because, you know, if you live in close comfort with people for, like, you know, an intense period of time, then, you know, things will develop. I mean, I was in the jungle many years ago with a group, and it got Lord of the Flies over food, like really Lord over the Flies. It was horrendous. We had to bail eventually because it was the only way to keep everyone safe. But yeah, massive fisticuffs over bottles of, like, sauces and stuff with rice. So yeah, not an easy one. So like I was saying, if you're on an expedition, then you're going to have to manage it somehow, and it just needs to be appropriate and sensitive to the two individuals. I'll leave it there because, like, that's opening up a whole different door. Okay, next question from Lizzie. You have someone that refuses to walk at the group's pace and keeps walking ahead so far that you can't always see them and they won't stop. So the sort of the classic hare and tortoise type thing. Again, yeah, I think this is pretty common. I mean, some people are like, even with groups of friends, they're like, yeah, we're going to the mountain together. And even with your own sort of preventative stuff in the morning meeting and stuff, or morning chat, you know, I've had it someone's quite fitness orientated, and the pace wasn't quite good enough for them to get the heart rate going, and they needed that sort of like that buzz for that day to be good for them. So they needed to go. And so, yeah, I can see both sides of this, but I think you just need to chat to them. As with everything else, it always starts with chatting to them. I think identify your responsibilities and what they've signed up to. It might be appropriate. It might be appropriate to allow them to go ahead a little bit. You know, if you can set sort of targets, you know, you can set targets, and visual targets is really what's going to need to be, I would imagine. I mean, depends on where you are and stuff, but you know, something that you can visually see in the distance, assuring that if you know the route really well, then obviously you'll know there's no blind spots or hazards and so on. But you set them visual targets along the way. Terrain, weather would be two of the key factors also you need to take on board. And I think the last one, granted you might have only met them recently, but do you trust the person? You know, do you trust that they will stop at that point? If you don't, you've got an awkward situation now, and there's not going to be an easy solution to that. Because ultimately you're probably going to have to say no, aren't you? And then sort of chat to them appropriately about that. But using the idea of like allowing them to go forward to get their little buzz if they need that. It might even be they just don't particularly want to be part of the group. They like their own little space and just want to walk, you know, ahead of the team a little bit. That can work. So, you know, if that can work, you know, and all the other factors fell in place for me, I'd be happy to allow that to happen. As long as they didn't go beyond that point. You know, as soon as they go beyond that point, then it's, you know, you've got a situation that you've lost control of really quickly. Last question from Lizzie. Let's get the sheets right. There's someone in the group who has their own map, GPS, and thinks they know better than you about where they should be going. And she just explained an example of on a trip they had with someone with a watch GPS and being adamant that they weren't camping at exactly the GPS points that had been identified earlier. So yeah, I think if you took this one a little bit further, you know, talking about people coming to you and going, you know, do you know where you are type sort of jokes or comments. I mean, some people do it jokingly, which can be quite funny or not, depends on the situation you're in. And others may question your knowledge. And I think this chips away at your confidence quite quickly. So you need to sort of like try and get a grip of this pretty soon. I mean, ultimately, like as the lead on the mountain, people are looking to you to be wealth of knowledge, be the guide, to make decisions, to look after people's safety, to manage the team well, to keep them informed, and so on. And as soon as this starts chipping away at you, then this sort of will definitely have an impact on your performance and your sort of effective management of the team. So, and it can even be like, if you get a compass out because the weather is sort of closing in and someone makes that joke, oh, do you know where you are, mate? It's just not funny sometimes because it really does knock you. So you have to sort of like just close your ears to that sort of stuff or respond as you need to, but just be mindful that, you know, it can have an impact. I suppose for me, I'd never be wrong. So that's the crucial thing for me. Now, under pressure, a map and compass, I can be marginally wrong. Of course it can be. You know, there's always things going on. So, you know, I always have the tools, other tools behind me to back myself up. So things like GPS and mapping software on my phone and stuff, or watches, whatever. And so I can, you know, before I make decisions, key decisions or such that I've said that I would do during the day, then I would always have a quick check where I'm at. And I'm not necessarily always shy about it or sort of secretive or hidden about it. I'm quite open about things as well. So I think when you have lots of pressure on you, so lots of pairs of eyes watching you and every movement you make, specifically like in poor weather. And then you have those sort of environmental factors as well, and the group dynamics. There's an incredible amount of pressure on you at any one point. And for you to make a wrong decision or say something wrong is dead easy, I think. So I think having the tools and the effective tools and using them wisely and well should be part of your toolkit. For me though, I kind of enjoy these challenges. You know, I've had a few people like this over the years, and I quite like the challenge of like dealing with this sort of situation. So like I kind of tend to go down a route when someone's not necessarily challenging me, because they might not be aware that they are that sort of style of person coming across. It might be that they're super interested or super excited, or they've got a new toy and they're just like really buzzy about it all. Or it could be they are just trying to like chip away at me a little bit. But I kind of think of it as a challenge, and I like to bring those sort of things on. So I tend to like build a deeper rapport with people who are like that. And, you know, just start a normal conversation. And, you know, it could be along the lines of, oh, you got this sort of kit. Oh, that's an interesting piece of kit. I've seen that before. So feigning interest in the kit and then turning it into a bit of training. So like, all right, does it do this? Does it do that? And what can you tell me about it? So allow them to have a little stage for a few minutes. And trying to build that bigger piece of trust. So like, you know, if we need to have the conversation a bit further down our line and sort of, for me to be dead honest with them, then hopefully it's taken in the right way it's meant. Because like, you know, if I've got that deeper relationship with that person, then hopefully if I need to turn around to them and sort of say, look, you know, I do kind of know what I'm doing. Thanks very much for your input, but I kind of do know what I'm doing. Then hopefully it's taken as it's meant, rather than if I don't have that relationship with that person in the beginning, then like it may not be taken as it's supposed to come across. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Chips away at you, Lizzie. Not easy, not easy. So Emma, as always, has provided me with a good question. Thanks, Emma. This one kept me entertained as well for a little bit. So setting the scene and managing the expectations at the start of a group walk as an ML is really important. What kind of things would you cover, check, or talk about to the group before setting off, and in how much detail? Yeah, cool. So just some ideas, basically. There might be some other things that you personally would add, or you do add already, but these are just sort of like some quick ideas. Now, remember that I said about having, you know, a list, an aid memoir, whatever you want to call it, but this would be in front of me as I am talking to the clients. So, and it's, even if it's on my phone, I make them aware and allow them to see it sort of over my shoulder, so to speak. So no, I'm not on Facebook, but I'm actually reading off a list. I generally think it's professional in the respect of that you will not miss things, the key important things that you should be saying that day. So in terms of check-in first, so I'm going to do a checklist, you know, things that I would personally check, and then we'll do a discussion list. This is what I've sort of discussed with the clients today. So on the morning of or before, medicals. So just want to like make sure I've got, you know, medicals, I understand them. So a bit of Googling if I'm not sure, or if necessary, a quick conversation with the client prior. And again, all I'm trying to do is just manage, find ways that we can work together to allow the day to go ahead. Make sure we've got some sort of consent in place. So, you know, if you come out with me, then you actually sign a consent, identifying that you understand some of the risks that are associated with the day out. I understand what the outcomes of the client are. So they've written to me and I understand what they would like from the day. Within my own booking form, it asks for like your own background or your experience. So I get a bit of a general overview of your experience. Look at the weather clearly, and I don't just look at the weather on the day. I mean, at the moment it's dead easy. It's just pretty much t-shirt day constantly. But you know, if the weather is fluctuating like it normally does, and changeable like it normally is in North Wales, then I'll be looking at the weather all the time. So for example, if I was I'm just trying to think what day it is. I've lost track of the days. It's Monday. So if I was working this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, you know, and the weather was changeable over the week, then I would be taking an interest from this point onwards. Really gives me some ideas of what the terrain will be like. You know, is it going to be saturated or not, for example? So you know, I will watch the weather a period of time before. Think about so I've thought about what the potential outcomes are. I thought about the weather, so I start thinking about the logistics. You know, so you know, where can I go? Car parks, you know, car parks are a real problem up here. So you know, you can have all the greatest plans in the world in North Wales on a busy weekend that's sunny. That plan can really come unravel really quickly for you when you drive to the first car park and it's full. You know, and you're like, oh no, or you've driven, you know, some way out of your way. So, you know, I need to have options and perhaps avoid some of those car parks. So again, that local knowledge, and then think about kit that I'm going to take for the day, and then meet people. And then these are the sort of broad things I'm going to talk to with folk. So the first bit is trying to develop this rapport, this relationship with people. And so I'm interested in people. You know, what's your background? What do you do? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What's your life, essentially? And you know, we'll just chat, and nothing about the mountains necessarily, but just chat about that individual. And all this time, I'm observing them. So I'm trying to work out, like I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to work them out. I've never met them before. I'm about to take them onto a mountain. It might be in some fairly challenging weather. And I'm trying to, in my own mind, create a stable baseline of where they're at in a comfortable environment. Talk to them about mountains, talk to them about currency, talk to them about fitness. So, you know, in that discussion, we can chat about around those other themes too. Then let's get down to the nitty gritty. Like, what are the outcomes? What would you like to achieve today? You know, what would be your desirables? Then I need to manage the expectations. So this is kind of where I kind of put on my party piece on. So talk to them about my role, my decision making, and never promising the summit. So it's all about managing the expectations at this stage. Now that might be quite a lengthy thing. Depends on the weather. Now, it really does depend on the weather. So and on the outcomes. So the two just might not match up particularly well. Showing the weather, so generally always show people the weather forecast. So if I need to have like a bit more of an in-depth discussion about the outcome's not going to happen today, then this is kind of where I'll really nail it. And also I won't just show them the forecast, I'd explain what the impact will be to them on the hill, so they have a really realistic understanding that, like, if they go up that route today on their desired outcome, they are in for a shocker, absolute shocker. So, you know, don't just show them the weather forecast, explain it to them if it's necessary. From all of that then, and I've already done a bit of planning and thinking, but now I can then really get into the nitty gritties and start thinking about the route option or options and present those to them. And sometimes, like, if the outcome is quite broad, then it may allow me to like talk through a number of options to them and sort of see their reactions on each. And I normally, if I do that, I normally just talk through the pros and cons, you know, what the route's like, what they're going to see, and how the weather might influence them on that route. And then we'll see what they say. I wouldn't be amiss to sort of say I do lead them down a path sometimes. So it might feel like they have a few options, but I'm actually leading down a certain route because, you know, I'm trying to give them a bit of ownership and build that rapport, but I'm also trying to like guide them down a certain way I want them to go. Talk to them about times of the day. So generally, you know, what time will be off the hill. You know, timings throughout are fairly dynamic, but people, and I find it here definitely on a Sunday, people want to be on the road by a certain time because they've got to drive back to wherever they've come from on a Sunday. So, you know, timers are quite crucial, and it might even be on other days as well, you know, if they've booked a table at a restaurant or something. So it's important to sort of like hit that well. Talk to them about kit. So, and this might be a show and tell type thing. So, you know, what kit have you got on you today? Let's have a quick look. But this is what you're going to need. Talk to them about food and drink. So not necessarily just have you got a packed lunch, but yeah, this is how long we're going to be out for today. This is kind of what I've got. This is what would be sensible. You know, fluid is a really good topic one at the moment. You know, taking a litre of water on the mountains today is not suitable. It's just not enough. You know, you can't take, you know, 4 or 5 litres, but a litre, you're probably going to be struggling. 2 litres is still going to be hard work, but it's better than 1 litre, and it's not a great deal more weight. So, you know, and taking fluid on before you leave the morning sort of get together, and taking fluid on at the end of the day will be really important too. And these are things that, you know, I'd be talking about at this stage. And then just simple logistics, you know, how are we going to get from here to to the start point, and cars and stuff like that, or minibuses or whatever you're using. And then the last thing I always finish up on is asking if there's any changes to the medical form. So sometimes people will book with myself several months prior, and so therefore there's a gap in the medical knowledge and history. So hopefully that will capture that, and it does. It generally does. People will kind of just give you a heads up that something else has developed in that time frame. And the other thing was in how much detail Emma asked. So as much detail as needed, really. So I mean, the key thing for me is to manage expectations and to like deal with questions that they might have. But there might be days, you know, when the weather's like this, and obviously we kind of want to go soon because it's beautiful and we just want to get out and people are excited to go. And on days where it's like the windscreen wipers are on full and things are flying past the cafe window, we might not be so keen to go out. But, you know, I kind of call it technical faff. You know, there are days that I will technically faff and sort of almost reduce the amount of time on the hill. So on those particularly challenging days, I might technically faff in the morning to have, you know, build that rapport, because like it's going to be a challenge of the day and I want that team to be like ready for it. And therefore, like when we actually go onto the hill, we won't be stopping as much. And that's kind of where I save the time. You know, when the day's like this, I can stop as much as often as we need to take photographs and soak it all up. But when we've got challenging weather, we might just need to keep moving. And so I can gain time and save time in different places, but I might also choose to not leave the cafe every single time within 20 minutes of meeting people. So I might leave a bit later, technically faff a bit. And, you know, perhaps on in that respect, you know, manage your time, but on that little aid memoir list, maybe put the times on it. So, you know, for my little lists, I have in big, bold, red letters at the bottom of the list, leave by 9:30, for example. So, you know, I'm working through my my list of things to talk about. I can see it's big, bold 9:30 at the bottom, and I'm watching the clock. It's a bit like what's going on now. So, like, I'm on 7:25. You know, I said an hour. I've got a question to go. I'm just trying to like get this right and get it measured. So, again, on that list, nothing wrong with putting reminders for yourself at what time you feel you should leave. Because then if you think about doing a big mountain day, then you know if you leave that time, you've got a 10-15 minute drive, car park faff 5-10 minutes, you know, you're losing time every second. So it's really important that you do try and stick to what you've planned, okay? Otherwise the day will run away with you really quickly. Now, I hope that gives you some food for thought. Excellent. And last question. 4 minutes. Excellent. I'm just going to like paraphrase this quickly. So this is a really interesting question actually, and I pondered on this one for quite a long time. But basically, I'm just going to paraphrase this. But basically, walking with friends, so not working as a mountain leader as such. One of the days, forecast was extremely strong winds. Friend was proposing a route that in Tanya's mind was a non-starter, and the mix of the group, some teenagers, a lady with Alzheimer's and a man with Parkinson's, went onto the mountain. Tanya proposed a change, and at that point, or it's a bit beyond that point, he said that he wanted to go to the summit, not come all this way to get to the top. I tried to convince him it would be best to descend given the conditions. I was torn, and I get that, really do. Needless to say, this particular person chose to go on with the group. Wind was horrific, ended up on hands and knees. Eventually did see my point and took a shortish route off. Friend that led the day ended up blaming one of the group. And then Tanya obviously reflected on it quite hardly. What should I have done, and what would you do if there's someone in your group of friends who's determined to get to the top even though conditions suggest otherwise? Yeah, this is a really, really hard one, honestly. it's an awkward situation with friends, and I guess one we've all familiar with, or we've asked that question of ourselves, I suppose. And just, I don't know whether you did, but whether it was worth a discussion, with your friends to sort of reflect on the day and how it went, and whether things could have been different. And it is very hard for me to completely answer your question, but I think in terms of like that preventative thing, for me it's going back to the beginning, going back to the preventative thing. So when you were thinking about it and weather and all that, for me, I tried to, if I didn't feel that it was right with my friends, then I would try and find a way of putting the facts across my experience and bring the whole group in as well, not just the key person, but bring the whole group in so they can kind of like hear what I had to say about it. So hopefully that the group of mates would like then, chat amongst themselves and hopefully make a decision based on the facts rather than sort of one person's desire. And I would be keen to sort of perhaps suggest alternatives as well. So if that was possible, would there be alternatives that would sort of like tick everyone's boat, so to speak, and still keep us all safe and so on. But I guess if you find yourself in that situation in the future, and you've just got to battle on, and to be fair, like the further information you gave me here, I mean, it sounds like you acted really well, considering what you've identified, and probably most likely have prevented it deteriorating it further, to be honest with you. I mean, the key thing is that you're all safe. You all came off the hill and you're all safe, whether you've had, an enjoyable experience or an experience. I'm not sure, but come back to that thing about I said earlier, just forget the mistakes and remember the lesson. I think that's the crucial thing. I think, to try and sum that up a little bit, it's a tricky one, but do remember as a mountain leader, and I think like it doesn't matter whether you're a mountain leader or RCI or a BCU paddle sport instructor or anyone, if you go out, or mountain bike instructor, whatever, and if you go out with friends, then because we've gone through a training and consolidation and assessment process, we have a higher duty of care. And so, there is some precedent here about this happening over the years. So if you find yourself in these situations, to get stuck in, because that's kind of like where it comes from. Yeah, it was a hard one there, Tanya. Yeah, hopefully that's sort of, I'm not sure I answered the question perfectly or completely, but hopefully it's giving you some food for thought there. Just going to quickly summarize it, what I've just gone through, and then there's a couple of questions I can see over here. So in summary, as I mentioned before, our primary job is to keep people safe. And so, you can kind of like define the role of a mountain leader in so many different ways as you so wish, but your main role is to take people onto the mountains and bring them off. And during that process, you keep them safe. And for me, it has to start before the mountain. If you're kind of like rocking up for work and meeting people at 9 and you haven't really given it any thought, then, you're missing a big chunk of your day. And preparation is key. And whatever your format is, whether it's the 6 Ps or prevention is better than cure or proactive, not reactive, or whatever other phrase you use, is absolutely crucial. There's a really good phrase Benjamin Franklin came up with, or said, like, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And I really like that. So having thought about what I'm going to do, I'm going to plan the day. So create your list. So get that list sorted, make sure the day is planned and you come across really well then to the clients. Make common sense decisions during the day, and this is based on your mountain experience. Keep people well informed. So it kind of feels a bit topical at the moment, but yeah, keep people well informed of what's going on. Work hard until you're back at the car. You cannot take your foot off that pedal until you are back at where you need to return to. Okay, so even if you're like an hour from the car, you cannot afford to take that foot off. You must perform to the highest point that you can and keep on working. And reflect on the day, without a doubt. I think like it's even if it's just on the way home in the car, just think, oh, that's a good day, or that was a challenge day. Could something have been different? Is there anything I could have improved on, or what will I take forward for next time? And I think that the very last thing is, you know, let's not be shy of accidents and incidents do happen. You know, it's a numbers game. You just cannot go onto the hill regularly with people and not expect to be like perfect every time. Slips and trips do happen. And so, you know, please be aware that if you haven't had it already, you know, that will happen at some point. And don't be shy of it. If you're doing all this as the basics, blimey, if you're doing all this as the basics, then really you're performing to a really good standard, Cool. Hopefully that's been really good. I'm just going to quickly have a look over here. I can see a few things going through. Yep. So sometimes we forget it's about the people, not the summit. I think that's really good. And I think, you know, don't be pressured by companies. I know it's hard, but and they'll be like, oh, you must get up the summit. You know, at the end of the day, the people are the important things. Mountain Leader Jedi. Yeah, that could be a new award, eh? Okay, here's one. If you didn't have enough food and water in the morning, how would you proceed? So you've met people, you're having a morning chat, have a cup of tea, you're identifying what they need to take for the day, and food, the fuel element, and they didn't have enough. Yeah, good question. So when it happens, it's happened to me a number of times actually. I've got options because firstly I'm in a cafe, so you can always get a sandwich, and we can, it depends on where I'm going, but we can also go past shops as well to restock. I'd rather that we've spent 15-20 minutes going to a shop to get some more stuff for them to like have enough fuel a day than go on the hill without that fuel, because I know all I'm doing basically is taking the problem with me and it will pop up later on. And I think one of the things that I would mention is I never share food with anyone. So, and I'm not being nasty about it. At the end of the day, it's my fuel. I know exactly what I need to take on the hill. I know I take a few reserves. I do not take extras for people. And I do not share my food. I will welcome any cake and biscuits that are shared with me, but I will not share my food because you know, it's important for me to perform to a high standard, and I can only do that with a number of factors in place, and that is fuel as one of them. Is there a duty of care if you're the qualified person and they carry on and tragedy happens? That's a good question. I'm not sure of that answer. I'm not aware. That's a tricky one. If you are the qualified person, they carry on and tragedy happens. Well, I am aware of an incident, a water incident, quite a few years ago, and it's the type of scenario that's been presented today. And there was a fatality, and the person who was qualified was criticised for a lack of, you know, intervening really when they had the right level of training and awareness. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Tricky one. I think, you know, I go onto the hill with friends. Not all of them work in the industry, so, you know, fair few do other things, and just hobbyists, I suppose, in the politest sense, in the hills, climbing and so on. But you know, I go onto the hills. I've sort of selected who I enjoy going out with, but also importantly that people who are safe, but also would respect my decision. If I was like, oh, easy, just be careful there, you know, they would be very respectful of like who I am and what I do. Cool, let's just quickly zip down. Yeah, bro, there we go. Hopefully that's all answered everything. I think we've got there, and we've got there in an hour and 5 minutes, doing really well. Hey, brilliant. Thanks very much again, folks, for supporting the evening. Hot off the news, there's another one I'm going to do in about 2 weeks' time, which Joe will release the details of. It's about the Mountain Leader process and everything around that. So looks like we're sort of easing out onto the hills in England, well, certainly in England and Wales. I think we hopefully will be able to access some of the stuff soon. So look forward to getting out, and be safe, take care, and see you soon.